Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 7 species of fish that can go perfectly fine in an unheated aquarium. So obviously if you are new to the hobby or if you are you're already in the hobby, heaters can be very expensive to run, they can be expensive to buy, and they can just be super annoying to have in your aquarium. They're pretty ugly because they're just like a big black stick. So having a tank that doesn't need a heater and species of fish that don't need heated water is absolutely amazing. I mean, all these tanks behind me are unheated, and we're going to be talking about all the species in them today. But basically what I've done is I've just put together a list of 7 species of fish that can go really great. They're super cold tolerant, they're super peaceful, and obviously they can go great in an unheated environment. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video with the first fish on our list. So as for our first fish today, we have one that I don't think is going to come as a surprise to anyone. We have guppies. So obviously these guys come in a variety of colors. I mean, you can get all sorts of pure strains, or you can just get colorful like culls, which are still very colorful fish. They're just not as pure strains. So these are oftentimes kept by beginners just because they are super easy to care for and also super easy to breed. So guppies are a live bearing fish, and they do give birth to live young. They give birth to heaps of live young actually, and those live young come out at a decent size already, so you can just feed them like crushed up flake foods or dry foods. So them and their fry are both super easy to care for. And also they are a super peaceful fish, so these guys can go in community aquariums, they can go with all sorts of small fish and tetras and stuff like that, and you may even be able to get away with keeping them with cherry shrimp in a large enough aquarium. One thing you do want to keep in mind if you are planning on keeping these guys is you want to provide them with plenty of bushy plants in their aquarium. So obviously giving birth to live young, you're going to want a place for those live young to hide and get away from the parents. So bushy plants like Java moss or this subswastatang, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but this stuff right here. Just having some sort of bushy aquarium plant in there just to give a refuge for the babies to hide in. As for diet for guppies, they can eat all sorts of dry foods, frozen foods, and live foods. I have a few guppies in my collection, and I mainly just feed them live baby brine shrimp just because it's the easiest thing for me. I always have live baby brine shrimp on hand, so it's just a super easy meal for them. But on other days, I do also feed them frozen foods when I have the chance, and also dry foods like tropical flakes and stuff like that. But yeah, as for water parameters for these guys, they are a live bearing fish, and a lot of live bearing fish prefer higher pHs. So a pH of around 7 to 8 is perfectly fine for these guys. And obviously being super cold tolerant, a temperature anywhere between 18 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is around 65 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. But yeah, with that being said, I definitely think that guppies are a great cold tolerant fish, and they definitely make a great addition into any unheated aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we actually don't have a fish. We have a small little crustacean. We have cherry shrimp. So cherry shrimp are a super colorful little fish alternative. They come in a variety of different colors, so you can get like reds, blues, blacks, greens, yellows, all sorts of cool colors like that. So cherry shrimp are obviously very easy to care for. They aren't really aggressive whatsoever, so they're not going to nip at your fish or anything like that, and they're actually super beneficial to have in your aquarium. So by having these guys in your aquarium, you're actually going to have your own little cleanup crew. So every time you overfeed the tank or you just accidentally drop too much food in there, the cherry shrimp will go around and eat all sorts of food that's fallen to the bottom. They'll eat all sorts of algae, and they'll also eat all sorts of biofilms that grow on surfaces in your aquarium. So yeah, they are a super easy fish to care for. They're super peaceful, and they're actually super easy to breed as well. So much like the guppies, if you are keeping these guys, you're going to want plenty of bushy plants, especially if you are keeping them with other fish. And that's obviously just going to give the baby somewhere to hide when the other fish are trying to eat them. So as for diet, they'll eat all sorts of sinking pellets like shrimp wafers or algae wafers, but they'll also eat zucchini, green beans, broccoli, all sorts of green vegetables like that. I even saw the other day someone feeding them rock melon, so I might give that a go. I'm not really too sure. Rock melon's like kind of expensive, so I don't know if I want to be feeding them to my cherry shrimp, but I would assume it is also safe for them. And then as for tank mates, all sorts of smallmouth fish like endlers, chili rasboras, other smaller rasboras like that are great tank mates for them. Or you could obviously throw in things like sucking mouth fish like bristlenose or otocinclus, and those are also great tank mates for them as well. As for water parameters, a pH of around 6.5 to 7.5. And as for temperature, anywhere between 14 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is around 57 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So in my opinion, I'd actually probably recommend anywhere between 18 to like 25 degrees Celsius would be best for them. But yeah, with that being said, cherry shrimp are another great cold-tolerant aquarium fish, and I would highly recommend them for your aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another live bearer. This one's a little bit bigger than the guppies, but in the same family, actually, it's mollies. So mollies are another super cool fish. A lot of the times they are kept by beginners as well, just because they are super easy to care for, very peaceful, very cold tolerant, and also very easy to breed. So these guys, in my opinion, aren't as colorful as guppies, but you can get balloon mollies, which are super cool, and yeah, I guess that's something that you can't really get as easily in guppies. But yeah, like I was saying, mollies, they're super easy to breed, super colorful, super easy to care for, so they can go in relatively small aquariums, like these 20-liter aquariums behind me, and they can also be kept outside in ponds. So as for tank mates for these guys, any other live bearers should go great with them. You can also throw in things like bristlenose, corridors, catfish, Medaka, tetras, barbs, Danios, all sorts of peaceful tropical fish like that. And then as for water parameters for these guys, it's practically the same as guppies. Well, it is literally the same as guppies. So a pH of around 7 to 8 and a temperature of around 18 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is obviously that 65 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. But yeah, with that being said, mollies are another great cold tolerant fish that I would highly recommend for your aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have Medaka. So Medaka or rice fish are another super common fish in the aquarium hobby. They've become increasingly popular here in Australia in the last few years. But basically, Medaka are just like your typical cold water fish. They, I believe, come from Japan, so they come from super duper cold climates. But the great thing about these guys is that they're basically like a guppy, except they don't give birth to live young. And these guys are a little bit more top dwelling than a guppy. Medaka are super easy to care for, so they're one of the greatest beginner fish in my opinion. They are just so easy to care for, they don't require much, and they can be kept in super small tanks. So as for foods for these guys, any sort of dry foods, live foods, frozen foods, it doesn't really matter. They'll basically eat anything you throw in there. And another great thing you can feed these guys, since they are a top dwelling fish, is even small fruit flies or like aphids if you can find them. But basically any sort of small like insect that you can just throw on the top of the water and that are easy for your Medaka to eat. And then as for tank mates for these guys, basically anything that can live happily in the Medaka water parameters will go great with the Medaka. There's not much that you can't keep with them. They are super peaceful themselves, so they're not going to nip at like any fish or like fins or things like that. So there's no worries there. The only worries is that these guys do, obviously being a top dwelling fish, they're going to be at the top of your water, so they're not really going to be looking underneath them a lot. So if you have fish nipping them from underneath a lot, they can get very stressed and even jump out of your aquarium. And then as for water parameters for these guys, a pH of around 6.5 to 8 and a temperature of around 15 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 59 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. But yeah, with that being said, Medaka are another super cold tolerant fish, and I would highly recommend them for any unheated aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, I've got a few of them behind me actually. We have a super fast moving fish. We've got Danios. So obviously there's all sorts of Danios, but I'm just basically talking about like zebra Danios or leopard Danios or whatever they're. I'll pop up like the scientific name on the screen. I think it's called Danio rario or something like that. Those are the Danios we're talking about here. Basically, I've got a few of them behind me. I've got some just normal ones here, like just normal zebra Danios, and I've got a few long-fin zebra Danios and long-fin leopard Danios in this tank here. And basically, I do prefer the long fins, especially just your normal long-fin leopard Danios. They are super cool. Like, I could just sit here and watch them for hours. They're like little little water butterflies. They're pretty cool little fish, and I would highly recommend them. But basically, Danios are another beginner fish. They are super popular, easy to find, super easy to care for, very peaceful, and can withstand a range of water parameters. And also, I believe I've talked about this in another video, but Danios were actually like the first fish sent to space, which is pretty cool. And they can like regrow their organs, I think, or something like that. I'm not too sure. I've talked about it in another video, and I don't even know what video that was, but if you want to go find it, just look through all my videos and you might find it. But yeah, basically back to the Danios. So the one thing I will say is that Danios are notoriously nippy. They're like just as nippy as tiger barbs, I'd say, maybe a little bit less. However, if you are getting the longfin Danios, I do find that the long fins slow them down a lot more, so they can be kept with a lot more fish. So longfin Danios can basically go with like any sort of small tropical fish like Medaka, tetras, barbs, all sorts of things like that. But just your normal standard Danios can only really go with a few faster moving fish, just because obviously they are nippy and they will stress out small fish. As for diet for these guys, they eat basically anything. I feed mine baby brine shrimp and dry foods, but they'll also eat frozen foods and live foods like mosquito larvae and worms and stuff like that. And then as for water parameters, you're going to want a pH of around 6 to 8 and a temperature anywhere between 15 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 59 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And the cool thing about these guys is I've actually kept them outdoors over winter time here in Australia. I'm not too sure how cold it gets. I might pop a picture up on the screen, but probably not. But basically, it does get very cold, and they were doing fine all year round last year. But yeah, with that being said, Danios are another great cold-tolerant fish, and I would highly recommend them for your aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another super small little fish. We have white cloud minnows. So I'm not going to lie, but white cloud minnows, in my opinion, are pretty boring. But they are a good cold water fish nonetheless. So white cloud minnows, they're super peaceful, super easy to care for, and obviously extremely cold tolerant. So these guys can go with a variety of tank mates, so things like tetras, barbs, Danios, Medaka, maybe even cherry shrimp. I'm not too sure on that one, but they could possibly go with cherry shrimp just because I believe white cloud minnows are quite top dwelling, so they won't really be near your cherry shrimp anyway, so I'd say they'd be fine to go with cherry shrimp. Something you do want to remember though, if you are keeping white clouds, is you do want to keep them in relatively low flow or slow flow aquariums, just because they are a very small, delicate little fish. So you don't want them being pushed around by the current too much, just because, you know, you might kill them, which you definitely do not want. As for water parameters for these guys, again, you're going to want a pretty high pH, so anywhere between 6 to 8 and a temperature of around 18 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is around 65 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. But yeah, with that being said, white cloud minnows are another fish that's extremely cold tolerant, and I would highly recommend them for your aquarium. Moving on to the final fish on our list, we have an Australian native actually. We have Pacific blue eyes. So Pacific blue eyes are one of the coolest fish that you can get in the hobby. They're extremely common where I live in southeast Queensland, so there's like a bunch of different like waterways you can go collect them from, but they are just a super cool little Australian native fish. They are one of my favorite blue eyes, and I do think they are very underrated. I think they are overlooked a lot of the time, but if you have a few males with a few females, I don't think you can get a much better group of fish. I mean, they're super beautiful, especially when the males are showing off in the mornings to the females. On top of that, they're super easy to care for. So in my opinion, they're one of the easiest Australian native fish to care for, besides like gudgeons, which are also pretty easy to care for and actually are also very cold tolerant as well. If you do have a tank with Pacific blue eyes, you do want to have relatively open water. I mean, you can have a few plants in there for them to like spar in or mate in, but having relatively open water will give them a lot of area to display to females, and they are just an open water swimmer anyway, so you're going to want a school of around 6. I'd probably recommend around 2 males to 4 females, or even 3 males to 3 females. But yeah, you do just want to make sure there's plenty of space for them to swim around in their aquarium. As for tank mates for these guys, I wouldn't really recommend mixing like Australian fish with any other fish. I mean, Pacific blue eyes can go with a variety of things, so they can probably go with like guppies, tetras, barbs, rasboras. But in my opinion, I just prefer to keep like Australian fish to themselves. Tank mates I would recommend are things like firetail gudgeons, even some like bigger size gudgeons like purple spot gudgeons. If you have plenty of space in your aquarium, you shouldn't find your purple spots eat them, but if they are in a small tank, your purple spot gudgeons might eat your Pacific blue eyes. But besides that, all sorts of rainbow fish and other blue eyes can go with them completely fine as well. And then as for diet, all sorts of dry foods, live foods, frozen foods, it really doesn't matter as long as you are mixing up their diet and making sure it's very high protein and nutrient rich. So like I said before, and obviously why they're on this list today, they are extremely cold tolerant. And in Queensland especially, they can be kept outdoors all year round just because that's like where they come from. So there's no problems keeping them outdoors here. And as for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a pH of around 5.5 to 7.5 and a temperature anywhere between 15 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around that 59 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. But yeah, with that being said, Pacific blue eyes are another great fish that's extremely cold tolerant and can do perfectly fine in an unheated aquarium, and I would highly recommend them. So that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys find a brand new fish for your unheated aquarium. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't done so already, please make sure to go down and subscribe. And while you're down there, smash the like button and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I try to reply back to as many comments as I can. Also, if you haven't done so already, please make sure to go down, click the link in my description, and go check out my new website. I launched it a few weeks ago. It's got all sorts of live fish, botanicals, aquarium essentials, and it will be having live plants coming extremely soon. But yeah, enough said. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in that next video.